Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
See You on the Other Side podcast episode 231. Join you the second week of January. My name is Mike, and I play in the band Sunspot with...
This is Wendy, also from the band Sunspot. And
this is Scott Marcus, not from the band Sunspot, but I run whatsyourghoststory.com.
And we're bringing back one of our favorite guests, a UFO author who's written the brilliant Silver Screen Saucers and also edited the multifaceted book, UFOs Reframing the Debate, all the way from the UK, Mr. Robbie Graham.
Hey, guys.
welcome.
Hey, good to be with you again.
Fantastic. Now, Robbie, before we get into any of the stuff here, you were just on Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, I was on the. I'd forgotten I'd even filmed it. They asked me to be on it last year, and they filmed me in London, and yeah, I just forgot all about it. And then someone just messaged me the other day saying, "Well, I've just seen you on TV," and I was like, "Okay." So yeah, it's in the latest episode, which is about Eric von Daniken, the 2-hour special. So that was pretty cool.
And so, do you remember what you particularly talked about, or did they just say to you, obviously with Ancient Aliens, that Giorgio's in the room with you, tickling answers out of you? Why is he, how did that process go? The producer came and then asked you what?
Yeah, Giorgio wasn't there, sadly. It was so. A producer contacted me from, I think, Prometheus Entertainment, which is the people who produce it, and they just, they described the content of the episode, and they wanted some input on the influence of Eric von Daniken on Hollywood over the years, and so they contacted me for that, and they wanted me to speak generally about Hollywood and the impact of Hollywood, and so.
So you just gave him a copy of Stargate or something like that? You're like, here you go.
Yeah. They wanted me to talk about Stargate. I talked about Stargate. I talked about any kind of Hollywood product that Eric von Daniken has influenced over the years. And I find it an interesting process because you sort of get to learn a little bit about how the show is made. And of course, it's remained over the past decade or so one of the most popular, or if not the most popular, UFO themed factual, and I use the term factual lightly, program about. So it was interesting to see how it was made, but so they hired out a very expensive millionaire's townhouse in London, and they filmed me in there, and they filmed me for about several hours, 5 hours maybe, and out of that, there's probably about 60 seconds on screen, but it was interesting, and how they do it, because of course the show is such a beast now. It's such a big show. It was micro-directed from Los Angeles, so they've got a director in London shooting me with a small crew in this house, and they were linked in real time to directors in Los Angeles who were directing them, and they were really specific about how they wanted the room to be set up, how they wanted the shots to be framed, what everyone should be wearing, etc., how the lighting should be, and that was all being micro-directed from Los Angeles through to London. And it just took forever to even set up a shot. So it was interesting. And
wow, that's cool.
Yeah, it was interesting and a pretty cool thing to do.
Well, I think it's really the fact that they're able to direct something from 4,000 miles away. That blows my mind that in real time the guy's like, okay, let's check the lighting, let's look at the shot. They rent the millionaire's townhouse to make it look like you probably have an elaborate study or something like that.
Well, it was sort of a study. I was in an actual study. There was an actual study in the house. So
that's cool.
That's where they put me. Yeah.
Did they give you the smoking jacket and pipe too to go with it?
Sadly not, but I bought my own waistcoat, so it's all right.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's cool.
Fantastic. So what we're talking about this week, we got some huge UFO news this week. So I think maybe we kick it off a little bit with a revelation that just came out, not in the usual crackpot magazines and websites that I go to, but rollcall.com which is a Washington, D.C. political website. And they came out that former Nevada Senator Harry Reid, if you guys remember him, he was part of the he was the old Senate Minority Leader.
Yeah.
They used to show him on the news all the time. He's coming back to Washington to push for more UFO research.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting, and of course, Harry Reid came to the UFO community attention in the end of 2017 when the New York Times broke the story about the Pentagon UFO project, and because of course Harry Reid was involved in backing that project, and but this is the first time since then that he's sort of spoken in such a direct way about his views on UFOs, or UAPs as the Pentagon calls them. So it's interesting, and I think we may see. Luis Elizondo, the guy who ran the Pentagon project, has suggested that 2019 will see more revelations, more information coming forth regarding that Pentagon UFO project. So interesting times ahead, I think.
Yeah. So Harry Reid comes out and his direct quote, he's like, I'm going to have a call with a member of the Senate in an hour or two where people in the military who want to come and tell somebody what they've seen. What we found in the past is that these pilots, when they see something strange like this, they're prone not to report it for fear that the bosses will think something's wrong with them and they don't get the promotion. So many, many times, they don't say a word to anybody about these strange things. The facts are they need a place to be able to report this, and that's what I'm going to work on in a couple of hours to make sure that somebody I think is a powerful member of Congress, I want them to be able to sit down and talk to some of the pilots who have seen these things.
Yeah, he said, and I quote, "I personally don't know if there exist little green men other places. I kind of doubt that, but I do believe the information we have indicates that we should do a lot more study." He says, "We have hundreds and hundreds of people who say that they've seen the same thing, something in the sky that moves a certain way."
But here's my favorite line of the whole thing. Oh, sure. I've been to Area 51. I know Area 51. I don't know if I should say many times, but lots and lots of times. I know Area 51 quite well. I know what they done there. Oh, I don't know in recent years, of course, but I know what went on there. And that's when the interview stops. The guy's not like, what's going on in Area 51?
That's when the signal got lost all of a sudden.
Yeah.
They couldn't continue. The microphone stopped working.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, I know Area 51. It's, whatever. Whatever. Bob Lazar has been telling us they've been reverse engineering alien technology since the 1970s. Harry. So that was an exciting, it's a slow news week, obviously, in Washington, because the last thing they usually talk about is UFOs or whatever. They're like, well, government shut down. What's Harry Reid doing?
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe this is because it's a slow news week. Maybe that is the reason. But yeah, it's one of several stories that have come out in the last few days and week or so that relate to UFOs and alien life, potential alien life. Of course, from the science community, the repeating radio signals received by the Arecibo Observatory, which is bringing the question of are we alone to the fore again, and a whole bunch of other stories as well, which I suppose we can get into.
Well, something I was thinking real quick is that the fast burst radio signals that were just received this week, because I think about when I go through my Facebook feed. Now, obviously, we probably all share a bunch of mutual friends who are all into aliens, UFOs, ghosts.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say before I was into paranormal podcasting or whatever, the number of psychic mediums in my Facebook friends list were 0. And today there's 40. And I'm sitting there going, we got to get a psychic brain trust together to do to try to predict the lottery or something.
It's a good idea.
But this week, the one that popped up most on my feed probably would talk about this fast burst radio transmission. So that's what you just mentioned, Robbie, the stuff they received. Do you know, I'm at a loss to kind of explain that because my science knowledge kind of ends at, I didn't even do a good job of dissecting the frog. Do you have a little bit more about what those fast bursts mean?
Well, I'm no scientist either, but according to the BBC, they had, among the 13 fast radio bursts, they had an unusual repeating signal coming from the same source, which is about 1.5 billion light years away, which is obviously a very, 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 very long way away. And some people have speculated as a result of that if it is, in fact, extraterrestrials, then the civilization that that transmitted those those signals would be long gone, presumably. But yeah, the scientists involved seem quite excited about it, albeit they are not, they're very far away from drawing conclusions at this point. But they do expect that they will be able to get more data on these because they're repeating, and they expect that they will repeat again. And so the next time they can try to identify the source. So conceivably, within the next few weeks, maybe longer, they may have more information on this. So it's one to watch, I think.
It is. And one thing that I thought was pretty interesting is that the same guy that they're quoting who said, well, we shouldn't discount the fact that it might be aliens, is Dr. Avi Loeb from Harvard. And he's also the guy who was talking about I'm going to butcher this. I need like a Hawaiian translator in my,
I was hoping you knew how to pronounce it, Mike. So I wouldn't have to butcher it.
Uamua. Oh God, Moana. That's just,
Moana.
Right. It's just hard. But yes, the Uamua. I'm going to keep butchering that the rest of the show, but that's okay. So apologies to anybody who actually knows how to speak Hawaiian. It's a beautiful language. I wish I didn't butcher it. He's the same guy who was kind of putting out there that that might be an alien intelligence, that the rendezvous with Rama out in space.
Yeah. And that's a fascinating story as well, because, of course, the original story about the, let's call it Hawaiian meteorite / extraterrestrial spacecraft
Perfect
carrier, that came out a while back, but only today or yesterday you've had a sort of a follow-up on that, a couple of days ago rather, had a follow-up on that, in an article titled "If True, This Could Be One of the Greatest Discoveries in Human History." And as you say, Avi Loeb, chairman of Harvard's University of Astronomy Department, has been quite outspoken in suggesting that this object that passed by Earth, he's pretty convinced that it's not natural, and that it may very well have been an extraterrestrial object.
And I mean, the thing is, he gives it the imprimatur of Harvard here. Mm-hmm. That's a big one. But to me, he almost seems like Harvard's Giorgio. In whenever this stuff comes up, he's like, okay, I'm not saying it's aliens. And he can say that because he's like, well, I am the guy running the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, right. And you are the guy that, believes in Roswell. Yeah. So it's okay that I say that. And the thing is, when he comes out and it gives that kind of like, so all of a sudden, you have respectable publications that are going to run these possibilities of extraterrestrial life, where in the past it would just be the Daily Star, or the National Enquirer that would run it.
Yeah, but we're definitely seeing. I mean, I very clearly noticed over the past 12 months or more, especially since the Pentagon story broke in late 2017, I've noticed a trend along the lines of, as you say, traditionally UFO stuff is covered by tabloids, and they have a bit of fun with it. It's rare, and and then even when the serious papers do get hold of it, the serious broadcasters do get hold of it, again, it's treated with a sort of pinch of salt, and that seems to be changing. I think that is actually really starting to change, and so I think increasingly people are much more accepting of the idea that we're not alone in the universe, and that indeed discovery of life in one form or another, whether it be microbial, on Mars or in a meteorite that we discover, or whether it comes in the form of an intelligent signal from elsewhere, I think people are starting to accept that this might be a realistic possibility within their lifetime, and potentially even within the next few years. And so I think when you look at that, when you look at mainstream news coverage just of astronomy, astrophysics, astrobiology, and the possibility of life in the universe, and you combine that with the media's increasingly serious treatment of the UFO subject, I think we're in for an interesting few years.
And I have to say, I got to hand it to Loeb and people like him who, speak out, because he even admitted that the idea of this object being like an extraterrestrial creation as opposed to just a natural interstellar projectile. He said that he got the idea from
Yes.
conversations with his colleagues, but none of them wanted to talk about it. So he said, I'm the head of the astronomy department and founding director of the Black Hole Initiative. In addition, I'm director of the board on physics and astronomy of the National Academies. So it could be that I'm committing image suicide if this turns out to be incorrect. On the other hand, if it turns out to be correct, it's one of the greatest discoveries in human history. So that was a quote from him. And I respect greatly his taking the initiative there and stepping forward and sharing it with us.
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic stuff, I have to say.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just picturing him with all his like old professor buddies, whatever, and they're all just like sitting around, like passing around the bong, like looking at they're looking at the charts, whatever they get from Arecibo. He's like, oh man, those radio bursts are so fast. yeah, what's that about? And like, what do you think, Avi?
Right. And then they're like,
Dude, it's aliens.
but I'm not saying anything about that, man.
Yeah, screw that, man. You do it, Spooky Mulder. It really is. It's cool that it's being covered in all of these publications now. Obviously, I'm reading in The Guardian and the New York Times. Bombshell came out, and we had to do this whole episode about that, including a song that made fun of Blink-182. But I think that there's a couple of things that have to do with the fact that alien stories in mainstream publication, or just even the possibility, are not dismissed out of hand. And I think we can thank the internet for that, because these stories probably get more clicks than all the serious political stories they do all week.
Well, they do. I was following that, actually. I was paying close attention to how often they're being shared, the frequency of shares on, say, BBC, CNN coverage of these UFO stories, and the shares of those UFO and alien stories just, far exceeded those of pretty much any other story on the page.
And it's just going to be because everybody's like, oh man, aliens, I want to read about that. Like the 50th story this week about Theresa May and Brexit, they might be like, oh man. Or here it's going to be like, you wake up and it's like, okay, what did the president do today? And
well, it's still usually an alien story.
right, it still is. I mean, and the thing is, you become almost immune to the outrage pornography that a lot of our journalism becomes. So it's like, hey, aliens, well, at least this is something nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, hopefully nice.
Right. It's like they always have that particular quote from Stephen Hawking when Dr. Hawking had that whole thing about, do we really want aliens to come visit us? Think about what has happened in history whenever two civilizations encounter each other and one civilization is technologically superior to the other. Right, yeah. That's basically, it's Independence Day without the video game logic where you just blow them up right up the middle. It's the Death Star without those two ports or whatever that Luke one shot. Like you'd assume these engineers, like they can engineer something to travel across the galaxy, but they're like, you know what? We're going to include a fatal flaw where if somebody taps this, the whole place goes kablooey.
Well, the other great thing about the internet and UFO research and just kind of bringing it to the forefront and allowing it to be in the consciousness is that, if something's reported on the news, it's usually kind of tongue-in-cheek and laughed off as the final story to end on a lighter note, and then it just kind of goes away. But on the internet, it can live. It remains out there. People can go and search it out and find it and continue to discuss it in this community of online individuals. Around the globe becoming a community.
That's right. There's no jerk-off local anchor person snickering at the idea of, oh, and Old Man Johnson saw a UFO again last week. Witnesses spot him at the tavern until 2 a.m. the night previous. And so it's nice to have a little bit more serious discussion of that.
It seems unlikely in the extreme that they would opt for the scorched earth approach that we saw in the likes of War of the Worlds or Independence Day or anything like that, because if there is alien invasion of Earth and they do decide to obliterate everything, then we'll have to launch a ground invasion or airstrikes in response, have to use nukes, then everything gets destroyed, and then all of our natural resources, and thus the reason that they're here is pointless, because we'll have destroyed everything. So I don't think that they would ever be so, like if aliens did invade, I don't think they'd ever be so open about it as to launch like a ridiculous ground invasion or bomb us or anything like that. It seems so primitive. I think even if the aliens' goal was to eradicate humanity, then direct engagement with their military forces is unnecessary. Because I think many real life UFO reports describe objects penetrating restricted airspace around some of the world's most sensitive military installations. They appear and disappear in the blink of an eye. They can come and go with impunity, and they don't seem to be concerned about our ability to interfere with their activities at all. So I'd say that these objects, if they can pierce our atmosphere and our oceans with equal ease, then I think that even if you go back to presumably they'd be immune to our artillery and weapons as well, force field, all that kind of stuff. If we can imagine it, then a civilization millions or even billions of years ahead of us would surely be able to achieve it, and as would we, given enough time. So I think that if we were ever to be invaded by aliens, we wouldn't really know much about it. I think that again, people frequently report UFO occupants and things like that as having psychic abilities, telepathic abilities, and so surely, if you're a psychically advanced species, you could just disable all of humanity through a psychic attack on a mass scale, and then or you could sort of, in terms of directed energy weapons, for example, like the Department of Defense currently has and has had for many years, you can target electronically parts of the human body through EMPs and directed energy weapons. You could, target someone's heart, lungs, whatever, brain, cause them to have a seizure, and you could presumably do that if you were advanced enough on a mass scale and cause the whole of humanity to just fall down dead in the blink of an eye, without disrupting any of the the infrastructure or resources technologically or environmentally, and just kill all of humanity, and then the world is yours.
Well, I think that's exactly right. I always think about the Twilight episode, "The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street," because in that particular episode, all they do is turn off the power.
Yeah.
And everybody turns on each other. And then at the end, the spoiler alert for a 61-year-old episode or whatever when it came out, the aliens turn and look at each other and they say, "The world is full of Maple Streets." And right, and so they'd figure out a way to disable us they wouldn't just come through with a blaster or whatever, destroy what they came for. I also thought the Torchwood series Children of Earth did a great job of showing like the horror of an alien species that came down and could psychically control all the children on the planet at the same time, turned around and looked at the adults and spoke in like the same voice. And everybody, including me watching the episode, crapped their pants.
Yeah.
And, it just goes to see that this idea of conventional warfare, which, we hardly deal in conventional warfare
No.
anymore. What do you think aliens are going to be doing?
Exactly. But for Hollywood's purposes, that's not good because, Hollywood's all about spectacle, especially science fiction action movies. You need big explosions, you need dogfights with alien spacecraft. It's so absurd. I think that if there were any super advanced alien civilizations out there who did mean us harm, it would be over in the blink of an eye. And again, that's something that Michio Kaku has said as well. He said it would be like Bambi meeting Godzilla if ever we had to fight, advanced aliens. He said we would present no military challenge to an advanced civilization at all. Be a pushover. He says forget all the Hollywood movies, and it's something that Jill Tarter, the former head of SETI, also agrees with. She thinks that it's extremely unlikely that any aliens visiting us would have hostile intent anyway, and that follows the idea, it's just a theory, I guess, that any sufficiently advanced civilization will have reached and presumably overcome that tipping point in its civilizational history where you have to, either destroy yourself or choose a different path and become more enlightened and civilized. And anyone who's sort of got past that point, we haven't reached it ourselves yet as a civilization, but will, I hope we don't live to see it, where we either obliterate ourselves or we manage to survive and we go in a different direction and we find a better way. And if there are any civilizations out there which are millions or billions, because there could very well be civilizations billions of years more advanced than we are given the age of the universe, then I think, it seems unlikely that they would be interested in, going around blowing other people up,
Well, I completely agree with that, and I hope we meet the Federation instead of the Klingons.
Yeah,
that's what I'm hoping for. One last UFO-ish story that I kind of want to talk about this week, just for a couple minutes. It's an older story, but it has to deal with the conspiracy theorist Max Spiers, and I think I'm saying it correctly. Spiers. It could be Spears, like his sister Brittany. No, but he was an English or a British conspiracy theorist, and 39 years old. In 2016, he goes to Poland to speak at a conference on secret government societies and all kinds of things where I'd be like, oh, yeah, I want to go to that conference. And he goes to Poland and, well, he meets a Polish woman, falls in love with a Polish woman, as everyone should do at some point in their life, every man. So
What?
he falls in love with a Polish woman.
Okay.
She lets him stay. She lets him stay with her at the conference after the conference, and he lives in Warsaw for a while.
Yeah.
And then living in Warsaw, and then all of a sudden we get to a few months later. He sends his mother a text message that says, "If anything happens to me, I want you to investigate it. There's people after me," kind of thing. And then he dies. Like
Oh man, talk about things you never want to hear from someone.
right.
Whew.
The original story said that he like choked up black bile and then died, and so now it's been 2.5 years since his death. There's this whole thing like, so the British authorities started looking into it because it's their citizen who died in Poland, and they leave the body at the woman's house instead of like taking him to the Polish morgue. I don't want to make a Polish joke here. I am Polish, so I'm going to make it though. It's like, you just feel like the Polish authorities, they're like, oh, we forgot the body. We'll get it tomorrow. It just seems like, oh God, guys, what are you doing? And so the BBC said they cocked it up, and so they didn't get they didn't perform an autopsy on him or anything like that. And this gets out into the world. And this was in, I'd say 2.5 years ago. This is in a whole bunch of different websites that I read that, they tried to silence this guy. And I don't know, Robbie, he was from Kent. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if for your, not necessarily like regional news, was it a bigger deal over there?
Maybe. When he died at the time, so Max Spears was sort of a figure, reasonably well known, an emerging figure within the conspiracy communities online, and he was making sort of appearances at various conferences and lectures in the UK, and he appeared in a couple of mainstream documentaries about UFOs and conspiracies as well that the BBC and Channel 4, these terrestrial TV stations here in the UK, had produced.
So he wasn't on Ancient Aliens or anything. You don't have to watch out, do you?
And he was starting to become, reasonably well known, and he was a controversial figure even at the time. And then, of course, when he died, the conspiracy community went into overdrive with speculation, and it was a suspicious death. I mean, the way he died was odd. There were a lot of unanswered questions, and people were demanding answers. And so, it's been in this sort of state of I think now with this case. Well, I want to backtrack actually, because I mentioned there was a BBC documentary. I think it was Channel 4. No, I think it was a BBC documentary. So, and it was very strange because when he died, very soon after he died, actually, the BBC decided very uncharacteristically to produce a documentary about Max Spears, and it was, and so I should point out as well, my wife. Sort of knew Max a little bit. She spoke to him a few times and was friends with Max's girlfriend at the time of his death. And my wife would communicate occasionally, I think, with Max and with his girlfriend. And but it was very strange the way he died. And then the BBC just very, as I say, very uncharacteristically and suspiciously, I would say, decided to produce this documentary that wasn't at all called for. No one in the mainstream at all had heard of Max Spears at this point, at all. He was just a figure within the UFO conspiracy community, but the BBC decided to take it upon itself to sort of make a documentary explaining what happened to him. It was almost like preempting. It was almost like a preemptive documentary to sort of say, well, you may hear about this in a few months' time. Pay no attention. It's all above board, kind of thing. it was very strange for the BBC to make a documentary like that, and it was an odd documentary, and they went to great lengths to try and explain certain things about it, yeah. So to be honest, I'm not sure what to make of the Max Spears thing at all. That it ties in with the whole conspiracy relating to so-called super soldiers, and I don't know. I mean, now obviously the official explanation has come out for his death, and any kind of conspiracy or foul play has been ruled out. But it's a tragic case, and he was only 39 years old. But I think he was a troubled individual. He was a troubled individual, and but I wouldn't really like to speculate about what precisely was going on with Max Spears. I mean, as far as the idea of super soldiers and things, I think it's an interesting idea. I mean, it's like the whole Jason Bourne idea. The CIA, various intelligence agencies have over the years attempted to tweak people in certain ways,
right,
in order to maximize their abilities to maximize their sort of intelligence gathering or combat abilities, or their usefulness to the national security state. And when you look at the history of CIA tampering with human beings, both physically and mentally, in terms of say, for example, MK Ultra going back to the 1950s, Project Stargate, and other projects as well. Clearly, it's in the interests of any national security state in any country to try to understand the limits of the limits of human potential, really, and to try to weaponize weaponize human beings, I guess, if possible. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if such programs do exist today. Whether or not the self-proclaimed super soldiers such as Max Spears and others have been involved in such programs, there's very little information to support those claims. They could just be fantasists or delusional, but maybe there is some truth to some of their claims.
Well, one of the reasons that I kind of interested in this is number one, the QAnon conspiracy theory in the U.S. is. I was saying it. Well, it's just people on 4chan. So if you guys aren't familiar with Q, it's this whole idea that there's some White House insider that's communicating through 4chan, which is an internet forum, usually saved for like vile memes.
To put it politely.
Yeah, right. So, and he's coming out, he's inside the Trump White House, and he's insider, and he's giving the world the real information that Donald Trump's mission is to take down the deep state inside the FBI, CIA, all of the Department of Defense, the government agencies, the people who are just appointed, who aren't elected, who are there for life, kind of thing. And that, he's playing 4-dimensional chess against the evil, like pedophile conspiracy of the deep state. And I always thought, like, well, people just need something to read on the internet, and it might be interesting. But then I see people that I know locally, who I respect, people with good jobs. I mean, not cranks, not anything, like, who are like, yeah, well, you should have seen what Q, said last night. What our president's doing for us, kind of thing. And I'm like, what? Like, it's one thing to be like, well, I support the policies or things like that. It's another thing to believe this internet commenter who's talking about this, secret program, and he's helping Donald Trump fight the people inside the CIA, the deep state, and to take it seriously. And I'm like, okay, people are taking it seriously. And that let me, when I read this about Max Spears this week and how it came out, it was an overdose. He had too much Xanax because they went on a holiday in Turkey, and you don't need a prescription. So he took some. They bought a lot, and they went back home and needed some for anxiety and stuff like that. It sounds like just a tragedy of that kind of thing. I don't know that we're going to get people to believe that it probably wasn't a conspiracy, because it just seems like the perfect storm of a guy going out to talk about conspiracies, says he wants the government to shut him up, and then dies under mysterious circumstances. One thing, Robbie, interesting that your wife had spoken to his girlfriend, because she's like quoted in one of the like latest articles, that just ran out saying that he claimed he was taken prisoner and that people were doing dark black magic and satanic rituals to deprogram him and stuff like that. Was she really into conspiracy stuff too, or did she sound like she was just worried about the mental health of her boyfriend?
I believe she was, quite heavily into conspiracy stuff as well, yeah.
And so when you just read that and you read this stuff, and when tragedies like this happen, and you're thinking, well, of course, it's a really sad thing and stuff like that, but drug overdoses are drug overdoses that can happen to anybody. Addiction and substance abuse can get the best of everyone, no matter what your station, what your manner of life is, and things like that. You think like, okay, you just worry that this is going to feed it just feeds the conspiracy theories even more, because now people are looking to it as proof, as in just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So reading about that this week, and then seeing like these new posts from QAnon and seeing people I know talking about it. I mean, I love a good conspiracy theory. I mean, I am bonkers for it. I think it's great. And when we're talking about UFOs and disclosure and the whole deal that the people in power are keeping something from us that we can't know about. And then if you are a whistleblower, you're going to get, they're going to fake a heroin overdose for you, or they're going to fake you could fake an opiate overdose for somebody in the United States and you totally believe it.
Well, yeah.
Right? Like, who would have thought Philip Seymour Hoffman? Who's going to be like, yeah, Philip Seymour Hoffman, that guy is addicted to smack.
Yeah.
It just happens, So you believe it happens to anybody. So you see this, and it's just exceptionally sad. I almost think there's while I love a good conspiracy theory, I almost feel bad at the same time, because I feel like it might take away from our discussion of what the real problem is that people who have issues with addiction and stuff don't have anywhere to go without feeling ashamed.
That's right. At the same time...
right.
No government anywhere in the modern era is like. I mean, you have to ask yourself the question: do governments assassinate people? If you think the answer is no, then obviously you don't know about. You're pretty clueless. So governments do assassinate individuals and have done for decades.
Right. We kill people with robots now.
But assassinations of individuals, like if you want a problem person out of the way, it's not like you don't walk up to them with a silencer and shoot them in the head in a parking lot. It doesn't work like that, because that's asking for someone to be, it's asking for a criminal investigation that ends with someone behind bars, and there's a paper trail, and there's forensics, and there's someone who's actually pulled the trigger, etc. That's not how that's not how state assassinations are carried out. Any kind of state assassination is going to be made to look like an accident, and it will be very, very convincing. It will be made to look like an overdose. It will be made to look like a heart attack. It will be made to look like a hit and run. It will be made to, and that's how it happens. You don't assassinate anyone by shooting them or stabbing them, or blowing them up. It's too clumsy. So it always has to be an accident.
Unless you're in a movie.
Unless you're in a movie, right? And I think I told you guys, maybe I didn't. When I was obsessed with this case, the case of Gary DeVore, the guy the Hollywood screenwriter who vanished in 1997, with that.
Oh yeah.
And his body was discovered a year later in very suspicious circumstances, and everything about it, his disappearance and discovery a year later, were all extremely suspicious. And I won't go into that's a whole radio show, but basically, myself and my research partner at the time, Matthew Alford, who's an expert on Hollywood propaganda, we just completely went down the rabbit hole on this case, and we were obsessed with it. We were completely obsessed with it, and no one else in the world was looking into it, because it was kind of like a dead case, and it was kind of like an obscure thing anyway. But we were, as part of our research into CIA and Hollywood, we found this case to be fascinating, and we decided to sort of reopen the investigation on our own terms, and we spent several years absolutely obsessed with this case, and I ended up, and we got super paranoid in the end. We thought we were convinced that our phones were being tapped, and I think they were. And we wrote an article for the Guardian, because we weren't just a couple of little like conspiracy nuts. but we were getting quite a lot of attention because we wrote a feature article for the Guardian newspaper in the UK, which went wide. And it was like the lead feature article in the feature section of the Guardian, and it was looking at CIA in Hollywood, and we talked about the death of Gary DeVore. And this is the first time.
I'm looking at it right now. We're going to put that in the show notes. So you guys can be able to see othersidepodcast.com/231. We're going to have a link to Robbie's article about Gary DeVore in the Guardian. You can read the whole thing online.
So that was we got completely obsessed with it, and we were getting quite a lot of attention, and we had like a Spanish TV company read the article in the Guardian and decided to make a documentary about it, in which we were interviewed. We were interviewed on BBC Radio, and we were writing cover articles for various magazines and all sorts of stuff. And so we were starting to bring attention to this case, which had been forgotten for almost 20 years or whatever at that point. And as a result, a certain ex-CIA operative who used to brief President Clinton, who was very up in the CIA. He wrote a book in 2012.
Yes.
I was reading through it, and there's a passage in there where he refers to a nosy British journalist who is...
Was that John Podesta you're referring to?
No. It's a CIA guy. His name's Chase Brandon. And
okay, got it.
Okay, now you put us all on the list because obviously they're going to pick this up. Like they said, Chase Brandon's name. Oh my God, Gary DeVore wrote Time Cop. This is a national tragedy.
Yeah, he did. He wrote. He was a script doctor as well. He wrote a few. So Gary DeVore was. Oh God, we've gone way off track here. But Gary DeVore was at the time of his death was writing a really incendiary screenplay, which he promised would bring down the establishment and all of these people in Hollywood and everything, because he was writing this extremely controversial screenplay, which was detailing real events in the U.S. invasion of Panama, and he was talking about how the U.S. government used secret laser weapons on civilians in Panama, talking about drug money, CIA drug deals, all sorts of stuff, and he was writing this screenplay anyway, and at the time of his disappearance, he was actually traveling to his friend Marsha Mason, the actress. He was traveling to her house to finish the screenplay, and he never returned. And they found his body and car a year later, and the laptop containing his screenplay was gone. His wallet was still in his car. His laptop was missing, and all that kind of stuff. And his hands were missing. His hands were missing.
Oh my God!
So that's why my friend Matthew Wolfe ultimately wrote a book and made a documentary called The Writer with No Hands, which was about Gary DeVore. And anyway, so back in 2012, Chase Brandon, who was Gary's good friend, or associate, and or friend, he was Gary's best man at his wedding. Chase wrote a book called The Kryptos Conundrum, which is actually about Roswell, of all things, and UFOs. And in that book, he makes reference to a nosy British journalist who was getting too close to the truth regarding the activities of this CIA agent, and so he decides to take this to his superior, and the superior decides that it's time for this nosy British journalist to have a heart attack, and then they decide to ruin his reputation, and then no one notices it about a month later when he has a heart attack and dies. And the name of the nosy British journalist was Robert Graham.
Whoa!
Oh man, you were targeted by the CIA. You're a dangerous man, Robbie. Do you use that when you go before you were married or whatever? You're like, I'm wanted by the CIA, girls. Man, I would say that, dude. I would have that. I would have a card that says that. I'd be like, yeah, I write UFO books and I'm a researcher. Obviously, I've done a lot of time in college, but you know what? I'm wanted by the CIA. Danger is my middle name. It's just brilliant.
Well, it was pretty terrifying at the time, I've got to tell you. I did it. Well, it did its job. I backed away from the case, I tell you. And I was sick. But anyway, I'd already backed. What's so annoying about it was I'd already backed away from the case probably a year before that, because I was so sick to the back teeth of it, and I was so paranoid by that point that I just wanted to go and start doing normal stuff again, and so I really left it alone. But then I went a year later to read this thing in this book. I thought, oh God, why me?
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, that's an awesome story, Robbie. Hey, speaking of Hollywood stuff, Scott, your story for the week is Hollywood connected, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, it is. Taking place in the Crenshaw neighborhood of Los Angeles. We are coming up on the anniversary of the very famous and tragic and still mysterious slaying of the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short. And this is a story that understandably has just captured the imagination of so many people because it is so high profile. It was so grisly to bring people back up to speed. I'm sure you guys do know what we're talking about, but the body of Elizabeth Short, this was 1947 in an undeveloped area of Los Angeles at that time. Now it's a neighborhood. And
So 1947, the same year as Roswell.
Oh,
we
there
know
we
who
go.
did this crime.
So maybe they're connected. But yes, Elizabeth Short was an actress who had come down from the Bay Area, and her body, she went missing for a couple of days, and her body was found cut in half and also further mutilated just off the side of the road. Her nude body was found. And nobody, it was a huge, high-profile thing. Basically, everybody who had ever talked to her, that the police could prove had talked to her, was considered a person of interest. They went so far to try to figure out who did this killing, but nobody was ever brought to justice. Really, they didn't even have too many prime suspects. There was only ever two people that they deeply investigated, and both of them, they were released. So let's jump ahead many years to the early 2000s. A retired LA detective starts to look into his own father's. His dad passed away, and he wanted to kind of learn more about his life, and found out, oh my gosh, my dad was one of the people that were questioned in connection with the Black Dahlia killing. And he went on a very biased research project. I can't imagine what their family dynamic must have been like, what the family reunions were like, because this guy seemed hell-bent on proving that his own dad was the Black Dahlia killer.
Whoa.
And
I thought I get mad at my father sometimes, but not like I'm gonna put you in prison bad.
Oh my gosh. So this is Steve Hodel, who's alive today. He wrote the book The Black Dahlia Avenger, and then another book called Most Evil. Both are all about his dad and trying to prove that his dad was the killer. And this, when I first stumbled across it, I thought, oh, this is so fascinating. I mean, it's a great story. And I think we all love conclusions in our great mystery stories. So I get why myself and the rest of the mass media wanted to, like, oh, cool, we finally solved this long dead famous case. But really, if you look at it, it just doesn't line up. His evidence is so circumstantial. There were, the thing that sent him off on this is he was looking through his dad's personal artifacts and found two photos that he said, oh, here's pictures of my dad with Elizabeth Short. So they at least knew each other. We can prove that. And so he published this, and one person came out and said, well, that one photo is of me, so that's not Elizabeth Short.
Oh, no.
And
oops.
Elizabeth Short's surviving family said, no, neither of those photos are of her. So right there, that should be the end of it, because that was what was really spurring him on. And ultimately, there's nothing behind his dad being the killer of the Black Dahlia. However, he has gone on to say that not only is he the killer of the Black Dahlia, that he came to Chicago and he was also the perpetrator of the lipstick murders. He went up to the Bay Area, and he's also the Zodiac killer.
He really doesn't like his dad.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So really, there's nothing behind it except the possibility that, hey, this was, until we look into it, it's a good story, but it continues to get press. It continues to get coverage. And I think it's TNT is coming out with a limited series that's coming out fairly soon this month. And they're doing a big event at the El Rey Theater in Los Angeles on the anniversary of the death called I Am the Night. And yes, it is on TNT. It will be on TNT, starring Chris Pine, so they got some star power behind it.
All right,
but this whole thing is based on Steve Hodel's assertions that his dad was the killer, and this guy is very money motivated, I have to say at this point. He's gotten so much ink off of this. He's put out multiple books, and I don't know. It infuriates me because people aren't really continuing to look into this story. So many people are just taking it at face value. Even James Elroy, who wrote L.A. Confidential,
Yeah.
he's a great true crime writer. He read the Black Dahlia Avenger and came out and said, "Yeah, this is great. This is the case closed. It's solved." And then he kind of looked into it more and retracted his statement. But so many people do that first knee-jerk reaction to say, "Oh, hey, we can put a bow on this one. It's over now." And the fact that this is going to come out in this high-profile miniseries kind of pisses me off.
Sure. Well, they did make a Black Dahlia movie with, who's the guy that was in Predators? I know he got the pianist guy.
Oh, Adrian Brody?
Yes, Adrian Brody. Yeah, I think they made a movie about it before the book came out, maybe.
And that was also written by James Elroy, the writer of L.A. Confidential.
You know what? And I'm completely off to it. It wasn't Adrian Brody. It was Josh Hartnett.
Yes.
So that's I don't know how I mixed those guys up. One is an Oscar-winning actor. The other is the guy from Friends with Benefits. Not even Friends with Benefits. The one where the guy doesn't play with himself for 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, sorry.
Wow.
Well, you're just thinking about the movies that are close to our heart.
Yeah.
But no, that's interesting. I mean, first of all, that he's profiting on the fact that his father, who was a physician and you assumed helped people, also might have chopped a woman in half and is the Scorpio killer.
That's one of those things, too, that he just makes these really... it's so funny because he's a retired LAPD detective. And you kind of wonder, like, I hope he held his professional work to a higher standard. But so many people believe it had to have been a doctor that killed Elizabeth Short because of how expertly the body was cut in half. That they knew the weak points, that between this vertebrae and this vertebrae is kind of an easier place to place your incision. And he kind of uses his dad being a doctor as evidence, but he was not a surgeon. So he was a family practitioner. It didn't mean he was not licensed as a surgeon anywhere. So it doesn't mean he had the knowledge to be able to do this. But it's just these leaps of logic that this guy takes over and over again.
Yeah, that is interesting. Well, it's the same kind of thing with Jack the Ripper. Like, I mean, not to spoil From Hell, but From Hell is like 25 years old now, the graphic novel. But that's the same idea that the surgeon is Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
And like the royal physician is Jack the Ripper. And, that kind of idea that only a surgeon would know how to go in there and cut him up. When that might be true, but I feel like when you're going in there and you're just looking at, I mean, I'm not a forensic detective.
But you are a killer.
But I have murdered some veggie burgers in my life.
I'll end on this one thought. And this is because, bringing this up, this is not paranormal. It is pop culture, but it's not a paranormal story. But to me, it is because I've been to a lot of the locations and I've done paranormal investigations at the site where they found Elizabeth Short's body. There's this great bar in Hollywood called Bordner's where people have seen Elizabeth Short's ghost. And the Biltmore Hotel, which doubled as a 5-star hotel in New York for the movie Ghostbusters, where Slimer is first seen. That's the last place.
Oh, nice.
That's the last place that Elizabeth Short was ever seen. She was seen.
Slimer is the green dahlia.
Exactly. There you go. She was seen near the phone banks, making these kind of frantic phone calls. And so, like, oh gosh, how interesting would it be if we could do an EVP session and pick up some of the conversations that she was having before she went missing. Oh. So I think it's fascinating to bring paranormal methodology into unsolved crimes and just to see, is there some residual energy there that we could maybe help steer us in the right direction?
And it's probably just as good of a research technique as this Gary Hodel guy did in blaming his dad for all the murders in California from 1947 to 1978.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Good story, man. We're coming on to the end of the hour. Now, first of all, we want to make sure that we thank Mr. Robbie Graham for sharing his Sunday with us and giving us his perspective on the latest UFO news. Thanks a lot, Robbie. When people are looking for you, where are they going to find you?
They're going to find me writing regularly for Mysterious Universe website, and you can find more about me and my books on my website, which is robbiegraham.uk. So yeah, I'm writing pretty regularly for Mysterious Universe and churning out a whole bunch of articles about UFOs and other weird stuff.
Great. And you can be able to find direct links to all of Robbie's work, plus his Twitter links. You can follow him on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. And you can see in the show notes at othersidepodcast.com/231. And then you can click on there and see what kind of weirdness that Robbie Graham is getting up to. Robbie, thank you for sharing your time with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much again, guys.
Thank you, Robbie.
Thanks.
For this week's song, we were thinking about the tragedy of Max Speer's death and also Robbie's own story of possibly being surveilled by an intelligence agency while investigating a cover-up. Whether or not you believe in conspiracy theories, from QAnon to secret super soldiers, our intelligence agencies wield a scary amount of unchecked power. While a majority of their actions might be in the service of protecting us, is the truth worth getting in their crosshairs? That's the inspiration for this week's song, The Man Who Knew Too Much. And you can listen at othersidepodcast.com/231.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at othersidepodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.
I'd like to sick the CIA on the people who aren't our Patreons.
If only we could do that.
Yeah. Only we could send drones to everybody's house if you haven't joined the Patreon community yet. Anyway, if you guys would like to be part of the See You on the Other Side Patreon community, what happens in the See You on the Other Side Patreon community, Wendy?
Oh, all kinds of fun. But my favorite thing is the monthly hangouts that we do, where it's a live online party. You don't have to live in Madison, Wisconsin. You can live anywhere, and you can bring your favorite snack, your favorite drink, and wear your favorite paranormal attire if you have any, or bring a prop.
Yep.
But we sit and hang out, and we talk about our favorite stories. We talk about weird things that we've seen or done, and anything related to any of the topics we typically discuss here on the show.
That's exactly right. And so the See You on the Other Side Patreon community is just way, number one, to show that you enjoy the content, the songs, little videos, weekly podcasts. We're in episode number 231 today. Your Patreon member, you can access 231 hours of content, even more because some episodes run long, interviews with your favorite paranormal authors, discussions about great movies and the real life supernatural stories behind them, and conversations with some of the most fascinating paranormal investigators that you're going to find. You can do that at othersidepodcast.com/donate.
And it's the time we give a special shout out to one of our favorite Patreon members, Dr. Ned.
Dr. Ned, we saw you on Friday night and it was so good to see. Dr. Ned actually came to the show after he saved someone's life with CPR.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
He saw an accident and he had to perform CPR on someone.
Seriously?
Yeah, until the police got there.
Just when you thought that Dr. Ned couldn't be more of a hero. He goes and saves lives right before the Sunspot show.
Right.
That's incredible.
Not only is a Dr. Ned See on the Other Side podcast hero, he's also a hero that actually helps and saves people alive. So thank you, your support. We absolutely appreciate it. It keeps us in business, Dr. Ned, and we appreciate what you do. And all of our Patreons, we appreciate the show ideas. We appreciate the shout outs. We appreciate the discussion in the Patreon group. All that stuff. We're really glad you guys are part of it. You make our week every week. Wendy, if the new listeners or even the old listeners who decided they want to finally pony up and give something to us for all after we've given them, where do they go and do that?
They can do that at othersidepodcast.com/donate.
And we hope that you guys will check it out. Everybody else, well, we'll see you on the other side.
Yeah.